When my daughter decided to take a family trip, I was left at home to take care of the dog. While it seemed like a small request, the feeling of being forgotten and unappreciated made me realize something important. Instead of sitting at home, I decided to treat myself to a memorable trip to the Maldives. This story is about rediscovering your own freedom, reclaiming your joy, and realizing that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to put yourself first. No one can take away the happiness you choose to create, and this trip was all mine. Have you ever felt left behind while others got all the attention? Remember, you deserve to live for yourself. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder about self-care and taking time for themselves. And make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future inspiring stories about finding joy and freedom in unexpected moments. 2 days before Christmas, I woke up early and went straight to the farmer's market, filling a large woven basket with the freshest produce I could find. When I got back, I started cooking Isabel's favorite dishes: lemon herb roasted chicken and creamy mashed potatoes. The entire house was filled with the warm, rich aroma of garlic and thyme roasting in the oven. My heart swelled with anticipation. I laid out the tablecloth, fluffed the pillows, and sat on the couch like a child waiting for Santa Claus, my eyes fixed on the door. Isabel had just finished her first full-time job after college. She insisted on working through the last day, wanting to leave a good impression on her boss. I always knew she was a hard worker. It was just past 7 p.m. when the front door finally opened. I jumped to my feet, smiling wide, arms already half raised for a hug, but she didn't even glance at me. She made a beeline straight into her father Victor's arms, practically bouncing. "Dad, I got a $5,000 bonus this year." Victor lit up like a Christmas tree, his face bursting with pride. He patted her gently on the head. "That's my girl. I'm so proud of you." Then Jonathan and Margaret, my in-laws, came bustling over, their faces beaming. "Isabel, you are the pride of this family," Margaret said, her voice soaked in admiration. I stood off to the side, watching them swarm around her. Of course I was happy for her. How could I not be? But still, there was a quiet ache, as if I'd been forgotten. After all, I was the one who raised her. I stepped forward, took her hand with a smile. "Long day. Are you hungry? I made your favorites. I can heat them up for you." She didn't even look at me. "Mom, can you not ask all these pointless little questions?" she snapped, clearly annoyed. Then she crouched down, unzipped her suitcase, her face glowing with excitement. She pulled out a stack of neatly wrapped envelopes and arranged them proudly on the coffee table like she was about to announce the winners of a game show. Just then, Lucas, Victor's younger brother, and his wife Catherine walked in. Their eyes immediately landed on the envelopes spread across the coffee table. "Wow, Isabel, looks like you're doing pretty great at your job," Lucas said, genuinely impressed. "I'm guessing these are gifts for everyone." "That's really thoughtful of you." The moment Isabel saw Catherine, she jumped up with a squeal and hugged her tight. "Auntie, I missed you so much." I stood frozen in place. In that instant, it struck me. She could treat anyone as family. Anyone but me. As everyone gathered around, Isabel cleared her throat and beamed. "To thank you all for supporting me this year, I prepared a little something for each of you. This one's for Dad." She handed Victor a $1,000 Visa gift card. Jonathan and Margaret each got a $300 spa voucher. The uncles got 200 gourmet market cards. I didn't move. I just watched as she handed out the cards one by one, smiling proudly. Catherine nudged her gently and whispered, "Sweetheart, I think you missed someone." Isabel smacked her forehead playfully, like she just remembered. "Oh my gosh, you're right. I think there's one more in my bag." Relief washed over me. So she had remembered me after all. Maybe she was saving mine for last. Maybe it was something special. I reached out my hand just as she bent down and scooped up our little dog, Luna, cradling her like a baby. She slid the last envelope into Luna's sweater and cooed, "This one's for you, Luna, for being such a good girl this year." I stood there, stunned. My smile froze. My hand just hung in the air, useless. After a long pause, I managed to ask quietly, "Isabel, what about mine?" She turned to me with a breezy voice that cut like glass. "Mom, you're home all day. You don't work. You don't understand how exhausting my job is. You cook and clean, sure, but that's your choice. You didn't help me with anything important, so why would I get you a gift?" Catherine rushed over and pulled Isabel gently toward the couch, whispering for her to stop, but Isabel wasn't done. She grinned and pulled out another surprise from her bag. "Oh, and guess what? I booked flights for everyone to spend New Year's in Hawaii. We leave tomorrow night." I stood quietly thinking, well, fine. No gift. At least we're going on a trip together. Maybe this was her way of showing she cared. I started sifting through the envelopes with the others, looking for my boarding pass, but I couldn't find one. I looked up at her, confused. She raised her chin like she was giving orders. "Mom, you're not coming. I need you to stay and watch Luna. She'd be miserable here alone, and you're the perfect person for the job." That was it. That was the moment something in me snapped. To my daughter, I was nothing, not even worth the price of a plane ticket. Rage bubbled up in my chest. I swung my arm and sent the plate of cookies I'd baked crashing to the floor. The shattering sound rang out like a fire alarm. "Grace, what on earth is wrong with you?" Margaret shot up, her voice sharp and shrill. Jonathan's brow furrowed with disapproval. "You just ruined the entire night. What kind of behavior is this?" Victor's voice was calm, but his words cut through the air. "If you can't handle this, then go. No one's stopping you." The irony stung. I wasn't family. I was the unpaid maid, the living dog sitter, the one who cooked, cleaned, and got ignored. I yanked off my apron, tossed it aside, and stormed into the bedroom. I grabbed whatever clothes I could find, shoved them into a bag, picked up my wallet and ID. Just as I turned to leave, Catherine rushed in and caught my arm. "Grace, don't! It's late. Where will you even go?" She looked back and called out, "Isabel, talk to your mom." Don't let her walk out like this. Isabel didn't even sit up. She lounged back against the couch, eyes half-lidded, lips curled in disdain. Let her go. What's she going to do? Run back to her mom's house? She throws tantrums all the time. She'll be back tomorrow like she always is. I stood there stunned. 20 years of love and sacrifice boiled down to this. If my mother ever heard how I was spoken to tonight, it would break her heart. I shook off Catherine's hand without a word and walked straight out the door. Once I got to the sidewalk, I pulled out my phone and called my mom. "Mom," I said, my voice steady but hollow, "I'm not coming home for the holidays. I need some time away. Maybe I'll take a little trip?" She paused for a few seconds, then replied gently, "That sounds like a good idea, honey. A change of scenery might do some good. Just be safe, okay?" Then after a moment she added, "Remember I told you I was thinking of selling the old house, but it's done. The sale went through and the money's in. I'll send some your way." She could hear something was off, but she didn't ask. She just supported me quietly and completely. I said softly, "Mom, I'm okay. I don't need anything right now, but thank you. If I ever do, I'll ask. I mean it. Thank you for always being there." She agreed with a nod. I could almost hear through the phone. But 10 minutes later, I got a notification. She transferred $20,000 into my account. The note read, "To my dearest daughter, go have the time of your life." That's the thing about having a mother who has your back. It gives you the courage to walk away from anything that doesn't honor you. That night, I checked into a boutique hotel downtown. For the first time in a long, long while, I lay in a bed that was truly mine and closed my eyes in peace. Early the next morning, just as I settled by the hotel window with a cup of coffee, my phone rang. It was Victor. I hesitated, then picked up. His voice was low but brimming with irritation. "Grace, how long are you planning to keep this up? Come home now. I went by your mom's place. She said you never showed up. I don't care where you are. Just get back here." I didn't say a word. I simply ended the call. Who did he think I was? The housemate? Some on-call servant he could summon with a snap of his fingers? The nerve of that man to bark orders like he still had any claim over me. Moments later, my phone buzzed again, this time with a flood of texts from Isabel. "Mom, seriously, aren't you too old to be acting like this? Going missing in action just to get attention? How immature can you be? We're flying to Hawaii tonight. If you don't come back, who's going to watch Luna? If anything happens to her, I'll never forgive you." I stared at her messages, lips curling into a bitter smile. This was my daughter, the one I raised with my own 2 hands, speaking to me like this. I once held her like a treasure. Now she saw me as nothing but a burden. Utility. Tears welled up again, but this time I let them fall, and I swore it would be the last time. I remembered when she was little, so sweet and full of love. She used to wrap her tiny arms around my neck and whisper, "Mom, you're the best mommy in the whole wide world. When I grow up, I'm going to buy you the prettiest dress." I can still picture her cuddled in my lap, all softness and smiles. But after elementary school, her focus slipped. Her grades dropped. Victor said she needed more attention at home and pushed me to quit my job. Without a second thought, I resigned. I became a full-time mom, putting everything else aside for her. But the older she got, the colder she became. I still remember the day she stormed into the house fuming. "Stop coming to parent-teacher conferences. Everyone knows you're a housewife. It's embarrassing. You can't help me with calculus or anything else. What's the point of you sitting around all day? You don't bring in money and you still argue with Dad." Over and over I told myself, she's still young. One day, she'll understand. I waited through high school, through college. I thought that once she entered the real world, she'd see what it all meant. But no, this was what I got in return. 20 years of silent, invisible sacrifice. And now I stood here staring at a daughter I could barely recognize. That New Year's Eve morning, she sent a final string of messages. "Nice going. You've officially screwed up everyone's plans. We're flying out at noon. Don't bother coming back. If you're not home by then, don't expect to be my mom anymore." Perfect, because I was just about ready to stop being her mother, too. I opened my email and sent Victor the finalized divorce papers I'd been quietly preparing. One line in the body. "Please sign promptly. If you refuse, I'll proceed through court." Then I powered off my phone, picked up my suitcase, and walked into the airport terminal. And just like that, I boarded a plane to Iceland, a land of frost and silence, for the first clear-headed holiday of my life. After Victor received the divorce papers, panic hit him like a brick. He started calling me over and over, only to be met with the same cold voicemail. "The number you've dialed is currently unavailable." He paced the room, his face tight with frustration. Isabel, on the other hand, remained smug and composed. She patted his shoulder like she had it all figured out. "Mom's just trying to get us to cave. Classic manipulation. She's a housewife who hasn't left the house in years. You think she's really going through with a divorce? Let's not give in. Let her sit in it a while. This will teach her a lesson. Show her who's really in charge around here." Victor's parents nodded in agreement from across the room. "She's gotten too used to being pampered," Claire muttered. "Divorce? Please. What kind of life does she think she'll have without you?" Harold added with a scoff. And with that, the whole family cheerfully wheeled their suitcases into the airport, ready to kick off their vacation like nothing had happened. That evening, Isabel posted a photo from their hotel restaurant on social media. Glasses of champagne raised, bright smiles, all basking in the glow of what looked like a perfect family holiday. I glanced at the image, then calmly powered off my phone. Meanwhile, I was sitting with a group of new friends, bundled in thick coats around a crackling fire pit. Snowflakes drifted down around us, and above, the northern lights danced across the Icelandic sky. We clinked beer bottles and laughed. No obligations, no roles to perform, just freedom. The kind I hadn't tasted in 20 years. I let out a quiet laugh and whispered to myself, "Being young is nice, but being free, that's better." I snapped a few photos of the aurora and posted them on Instagram with a simple caption, "Feels like a dream. You only get one life. Be good to yourself." Within a minute, Isabel's voice message popped up in my inbox. Her voice was high-pitched, furious. "How could you? You're using Dad's money to go on some wild vacation by yourself. I worked my butt off all year and barely saved anything. Do you even care about us? You're so selfish." I didn't listen to the rest. I just swiped it away. She was right about one thing, though. I was being selfish, and for once in my life, I was finally okay with that. To breathe, to live on my own terms. I only regretted not doing it sooner. So I posted another photo, my boarding pass for a flight to Norway. The caption was just 4 words, "Next stop," even brighter. That was the moment Isabel finally broke. She started calling non-stop, leaving voicemail after voicemail, frantic texts demanding answers. Why had I run away? Why was I wasting money? Why was I acting like a child? I didn't answer. Not a single call. Eventually, I blocked her number. Fuming, she changed her return flight. The 7-day trip was cut short to 2. She stormed into my mother's house the next evening, bursting into tears in the living room. "Grandma, Mom's being totally selfish. She ran off overseas while we were trying to celebrate as a family. She cut contact with all of us, and she's spending all of Dad's hard-earned money." My mother sat silently for a long moment, then looked up and said calmly, "Let me ask you something. When your whole family flew off to Hawaii, did any of you ask if your mother wanted to come?" Isabel froze. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Victor jumped in quickly, trying to smooth things over. "Bess, you've got it wrong. Grace said she didn't want to come. She was trying to save money." My mother gave a dry, biting chuckle. "That's funny. Just now you said she was spending too much. Now she's saving. Which version is it? Let me make this perfectly clear. No one gets to bully my daughter. I have her back, and with me behind her, she will never need anyone's pity. She doesn't lack for anything, least of all your crumbs." Then she stood up, pointed to the front door, and said without raising her voice, "Get out!" Victor and Isabel shuffled out, stunned. It wasn't until they were sitting in the car, silence hanging thick between them, that Victor blinked and muttered, "Wait, I remember now. Your grandma mentioned she was selling the old house. From the way she talked today, it's probably already sold. And if it is, she must have given that money to your mom." Isabel's face drained of color. "What? Grandma sold the house?" she gasped. "That place is worth a fortune. No wonder she filed for divorce. She wants to take that money and run. This can't happen. We have to get that money back." From that day on, Isabel changed. She wasn't the smug, self-assured girl I'd left behind. Now, she messaged me constantly asking how my day was, if I was enjoying the trip, how the weather was, when I planned to come home. As if a few sweet words could erase everything she'd said to me. She thought I'd melt the moment. She acted soft like I always used to, but not this time. For days I didn't reply. Then one night, she sent a voice message. Her voice trembled thick with tears. "Mom, I messed up. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean any of it. I was just so angry. I didn't think you'd really leave. Please come back. I swear I'll be different. I'll change. Just come home, okay?" I listened and laughed quietly. She still didn't get it. I didn't walk out because of a plane ticket. I left because I finally saw the truth. What I meant to this family, where I stood, and I wasn't going to stand there anymore. I deleted the message and I kept moving forward. 1 month later, I came back. The moment I stepped through the front door, Victor looked like a drowning man grabbing for a lifeline. He picked up his phone with shaking hands and called Isabel. "She's back. Get home now. I told you she wouldn't go through with it. If she actually signed those papers, we'd be out 300 grand. Isabel showed up in a flash. As soon as she saw me, she threw her arms open and rushed forward. "Mom, you're finally back. I missed you so much." I raised my hand and stopped her cold. Then calmly, I pulled the divorce papers from my bag and laid them flat on the table. My voice was even. "Go ahead and sign these. Keep the house, the car, the daughter. I want none of it." Victor's grin froze in place. His face turned a sickly shade. "Grace," he said, stunned, "how could you do this? You know how hard I've worked all these years. You sat at home enjoying life for 2 decades, and now you just walk away. All because you felt a little left out? That's worth throwing away a marriage. I stood tall and met his gaze, then slammed the papers back on the table with a cold thud. You think being a housewife is easy? You think Isabel turned out this way by accident? It was you who made me quit my job to raise her, and it was you who spent years tearing me down in front of her, telling her I was worthless because I didn't bring home a paycheck. Your parents sneered at me every chance they got, and you never once defended me. She disrespects me because all her life, she's only ever heard you say I was just some freeloader. Victor's face twisted and his tone turned ugly. Let's be honest. None of this would be happening if your mom hadn't come into money. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You wouldn't dare pull this if you didn't have her bankrolling your rebellion. Isabel, who'd been pretending to look contrite, snapped the moment she heard him. Her face darkened. Her voice rose. You're being ridiculous. Don't think just because you've got some money now, you can treat us like garbage. You haven't taken a second to think about your behavior, I replied calmly, my voice icy. I raised you with everything I had. I didn't raise you to treat your mother like she's beneath you. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I turned to both of them and said slowly, deliberately, if you won't sign, I'll take this to court. I'm ready either way. And with that, I turned open the door and walked out. I didn't look back, not once, because in that moment, I knew I was no longer the woman trapped in the kitchen. I was free, and I had no intention of ever going back. The very next day, after I left, Victor and Isabel showed up at my mother's house. That morning, the doorbell rang. My mom told me later it was the two of them again. Same faces, same tone, just a different stage. Yesterday, they'd played the pitiful victims in front of me. Today, they showed up at her door trying to go around me, fishing for answers. Like father, like daughter, what a pair. My mom didn't let them in. She stood right at the door. She placed her freshly cleaned ceramic coffee cup down on the entryway table and said, cool and measured. She's doing just fine. She's just tired of being emotionally blackmailed. Isabel froze for a moment, then forced a smile that looked more painful than sincere. Grandma, we were just worried she might do something impulsive, financially. Victor quickly jumped in. Yes, Bess, we're only trying to protect the family assets. She's just emotional right now. My mother gave a quiet, sharp smile, but not the kind of smile you'd want to be on the receiving end of. So that's what you're here for, she said, voice sharp beneath the calm. You want to know what she's doing with the money, don't you? They tried to backpedal to explain, but she didn't give them the chance. I've already spoken with a lawyer. Grace is a grown woman. She can make her own decisions, and if you're hoping to squeeze anything out of me, don't waste your breath. Then she added almost as an afterthought, but each word landed like a gavel strike. Stop treating her like she's still some pushover housewife. She knows how to protect herself now. Legally, the door didn't slam, but it shut with quiet finality. That afternoon, I sat in my mom's study for hours. The documents my lawyer had sent were spread across the table. Trust structures, asset statements, banking records. I stared at them for a long while, almost dazed. For the first time in my life, the papers in front of me weren't handed to me by someone else with a sticky note saying, "Sign here." They were mine, and the decisions were mine to make. My mom stood by the bookshelf holding a cup of red tea. Her voice was steady. "This money," she said, "was something I always meant to give you later, for your future, to make sure you'd be secure." She paused, then looked straight at me. Those gentle eyes, now lined with age, but sharper than ever. "But it turns out you need it now." She came over, sat beside me, and placed her hand gently over mine. "Grace, your father and I, we woke up too late. By the time we realized we had to protect ourselves, we didn't have much left. But you, sweetheart, you still have choices." My throat tightened. My eyes stayed dry, but only because the ache was buried too deep. I picked up the pen, and for the first time, I wasn't signing an insurance policy for Victor, not a loan guarantee, not a joint purchase agreement. I signed my own name, sole owner of the trust, and my hand didn't even shake. I did a few very important things that day. I froze all joint accounts with Victor. Every penny I owned was moved into a brand new private account under my name only. I updated my will. Every authorized name that had once been Victor's or Isabel's was removed. I emailed Heather, my lawyer and college friend, with full instructions to handle the divorce. Heather has the mind of a legal textbook and the loyalty of a sister. I called my financial advisor and activated enhanced verification protocols. No money moves without my explicit in-person consent. A week after I made the financial split, Isabel reached out again. This time, it was a voice message. Her tone was light and breezy as if nothing had ever happened. "Mom, you're amazing. Going to Iceland and Norway all by yourself. Was it beautiful? I'd love to hear about it. Maybe next time we can travel together somewhere even farther." I didn't respond. A day later, another message came in. This time, her voice was tight, brittle. "Mom, things haven't been great lately. There were layoffs at work, and I was thinking maybe I could come home and stay with you for a while." I said nothing. I wanted to see how long she could keep the act going. 2 days later, she sent a screenshot of a credit card statement. Caption read, "My card's maxed out. Really wish I hadn't spent so much before. I miss you, Mom." That one nearly made me laugh out loud. Miss me or miss my money? Her tearful apologies, her regret. It was all part of the script, and I knew exactly what came next. If I caved even a little, she'd ramp up the drama. Cue the act. The prodigal daughter begs for forgiveness. I ignored her again, but this time I quietly installed call recording and screen mirroring software on my phone because when the apology phase ends, the manipulation phase begins. And I was done being caught off guard. On the 5th day, just as I expected, she called. The moment I picked up, her voice was already quivering with tears. "Mom, I really can't do this anymore. I fell downstairs today, just outside my building. No one helped me. I was lying there alone, and all I wanted was to call you." I didn't say anything, just silence. She waited a beat, then shifted gears, her tone tightening. "Did you change your bank password recently? I tried to check your utility bill yesterday, and I couldn't log in." I smirked quietly, though my voice remained calm. "I've upgraded my account security. The bank recommended it, said identity theft is on the rise." Her voice sharpened immediately. "Mom, I'm not some stranger. I'm your daughter. Are you seriously protecting your account from me?" I didn't argue. I stayed steady. "If you really want to help, send that paperwork I asked for last month, but don't touch my bank account again." She went quiet for just a few seconds, then let out a bitter laugh. "Fine. So I really am an outsider now, huh?" "No," I replied evenly. "You made yourself one the day you started treating me like an ATM." There was a loud thud. She'd slammed her phone against something. Then, as if the dam finally burst, she snapped. "You think you're so above it all, don't you? That trust fund isn't just yours. You lived off Dad's money your whole life, and now you want to keep everything for yourself just because you got a divorce." There it was. She wasn't looking for forgiveness. She was looking for a balance sheet for inheritance, for control. I tapped my screen to activate the recording overlay. My tone stayed measured, every word intentional. "Samantha, you're aware this call is being recorded, right? I'll be forwarding it to my legal team as supporting evidence in my petition for a no-contact order." Silence. Then I heard it. Her composure crumbled. She started sobbing, full body, guttural crying. "I can't do this anymore. How can you be this heartless? Don't you remember that night I had a fever and you didn't sleep sitting by my bed the whole time? Doesn't any of that mean something to you?" I took a breath, a deep, studying breath. "I remember," I said softly. "I remember how I didn't drink a drop of water that night, scared you'd wake up and not see me there. I remember when you were 6, and you said you'd buy me a house when you grew up. When you were 10, you promised to take me to Hawaii. But I also remember how you told me I was embarrassing for being a stay-at-home mom. You asked me not to show up at your parent-teacher conferences. You told me I was useless, that I couldn't help with your homework, that I didn't earn money and didn't deserve respect." She shrieked through the line. "So you're cutting me off over that?" You'd throw away everything for this? My voice dropped to a whisper, clear and cold. No, I'm cutting you off because you're using the love I gave you as leverage. You think affection is a bargaining chip. I can forgive immaturity, Samantha, but I will not be emotionally extorted. Then I ended the call. I opened her contact profile, blocked her on every platform, set her profile so she could never add me again, and I didn't leave so much as a goodbye. That evening, I opened the fridge and saw the pickled cucumbers I'd made the day before. I'd made them with her in mind, just in case she showed up at my door, apologetic one last time. Now, I took the jar, walked it to the trash can, and dropped it in. I wasn't saving anything anymore, not even the hope that she might come back. The next chapter. The following morning, I received an email from my lawyer, Heather. The subject was direct, and the words within were both chilling and strangely satisfying. Zach's petition has been filed. Grace, she wrote, Zach is trying to claim part of your trust fund. He's arguing that the money your mother gave you was transferred during the marriage, and thus should be considered marital property. I let out a quiet laugh. Of course he did. And of course he'd stoop that low. But here's the truth. My mother's money was transferred to me after I moved out, after I officially separated from Victor. She didn't give it to me as a wedding gift. It wasn't some long-term joint investment. She sent it 2 months ago when she saw me at my lowest. She didn't even explain, just sent the funds with a note in the transfer description. For my daughter's life, her own life. It was clean, timed, documented, and now Victor wanted to twist that timeline, try to paint it as joint property simply because we weren't legally divorced yet. I didn't say anything. I just flipped through the so-called evidence packet his lawyer had submitted. Unbelievable. Thick skin didn't even begin to describe it. His claim stated, while the funds originated from the petitioner's mother-in-law, the transfer occurred during the legal marriage. As such, both parties had theoretical access and shared entitlement. Then, in a final flourish of audacity, he added, I have no objection to these funds being used to support the family and our daughter's future needs. Oh, so that's what this was about? Supporting the family or funding his next personal growth journey? Heather and I got to work. We submitted all documents, the transfer date, 2 weeks after I had moved out and officially separated from Victor, the receiving account newly created under my name only. Victor had no access, no prior knowledge. Most importantly, the text my mother sent me the day she wired the funds, still saved on my phone. It read, Don't give him a single cent. This is the first time in your life you get to spend money on yourself. This wasn't a financial dispute. This was Victor finally showing his cards, not afraid of the divorce, but terrified of losing control over me and the money. On the day of the hearing, Victor showed up in the same gray suit he'd worn at least a dozen times during our marriage. Back then, he wore it to marry me. Now, he wore it to try and walk away with whatever he could grab. He stood trying to sound reasonable. I just want clarity on marital assets. We both have a responsibility to our daughter. Heather stood and opened her file. Her voice was cool, steady. First, these funds were a personal gift from Grace Mitchell's mother, designated solely for her use. Second, the transfer occurred after legal separation. Victor Mitchell had no involvement in the management of those funds. Third, Victor Mitchell has engaged in multiple acts of financial misconduct, including unapproved loans and fund transfers, compromising marital financial trust. We have documentation to support this. She slid the evidence across the table, screenshots of the wire transfer, the transaction note, the original text from my mother, and best of all, a copy of the loan documents Victor had once asked me to just sign real quick, back when he thought I didn't read fine print. I heard Victor exhale sharply across the table. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected me to keep receipts. He never thought the little papers he once slipped under my nose would show up in court as Exhibit A in the case against him. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, wasn't amused. After flipping through everything, she looked up and delivered her ruling in one concise line. It is evident that these funds were a post-separation personal gift from Grace Mitchell's mother. Mr. Mitchell has no legal claim to them. You hear that? She said it with professional grace, but the message was crystal clear. Victor, keep your hands off my money. I'm Bess, Grace's mother. The day Samantha and Victor showed up at my door, it was bitterly cold. I stood just inside the threshold, watching them with their overly polite smiles and eyes that kept darting, always toward the same corner of my living room. They didn't ask to come in, and I didn't invite them. I wasn't interested in hearing another rehearsed speech about concern or family unity. What I did notice was how their gaze kept flicking toward that old filing cabinet in the corner, the one that held decades of Grace's household records, receipts, and documents. They weren't here to check on anyone's well-being. They were here to check the math, and I saw right through them. I've never been a fool. I remember the first time Grace brought Victor home. They were newly engaged, still caught in that soft blur of early commitment. The two of them sat on the little balcony just off the kitchen, and I brought out a cake I'd baked that morning. Grace's eyes sparkled as she said, "Victor is so grounded, responsible, and family-oriented." But I saw something different. Victor smiled plenty at Grace, not so much at me. He was pleasant, sure, but distant, polished, not sincere. During dinner, he spoke about his goals, his ambitions, the long hours he worked, but never once did he mention responsibility. Not once did he speak of what he'd give to Grace, only what she understood about him. "Grace is easygoing," he said. "She gets me." He meant it as praise, but I heard the subtext loud and clear. She's easy to manage. He was attentive to her almost performatively, but not to me. Not a single complete thank you. When dinner was over and I began clearing plates, he didn't even glance in my direction. That was the moment I knew this man might like my daughter, maybe even enjoy her company, but he didn't respect her. And he sure as hell didn't respect her family. So I said nothing, because it wasn't my place to choose for her. My role wasn't to block her path. It was to make sure she always had a way back, a soft place to land if the road she chose ever turned rough, and that's what I've done all these years. I watched her, quiet, patient, pushing through. I watched her swallow every disappointment, every indignity, every heavy silence at dinner when her opinion wasn't asked or her effort wasn't acknowledged. I watched her live the version of marriage I knew all too well, and now, all these years later, I see the same shadows in her posture that I once carried in mine. But this time, the story will end differently. Because this time, I'm not just the woman in the background making tea and smoothing linens. I'm the one standing in the doorway, keeping out the people who never saw her as more than an extension of what they could take. The year Grace got married, I gifted her the wedding dress and jewelry myself. She stood there in her veil, crying like a little girl, clutching my hand and saying, "Mom, I'm going to have a good life." I cried too, but not because she was leaving. I cried because deep down, I already heard a voice whispering inside me, "She's going to suffer sooner or later." After she moved in with Victor, I offered to come by every now and then to help with the baby and meals. She had just given birth to Samantha. She was exhausted, barely able to finish a sentence without nodding off. Victor was polite to me on the surface, but his politeness always carried a certain edge, like I was a guest overstaying my welcome. I remember once at dinner, I casually mentioned, "Samantha's cough might ease if you apply a warm compress at night." Victor, without even looking up, replied flatly, "That's an old issue. She always gets over it. No need to fuss." Another time, Grace told me she was thinking of picking up some part-time work. Before she could finish, Victor cut in, "Your body isn't what it used to be. Wouldn't it be better to just rest at home?" And then there was the day he joked over dinner, "Isn't it kind of natural for Bess to help out with the baby? It's not like she's working." He laughed as if it were nothing, but in my ears, it landed like lead. I said nothing because I knew exactly what I was looking at. Not a man being careless with his words, but a man skilled in control. One moment I'll never forget. I was in the kitchen washing dishes. Samantha came running in crying for chocolate. I told her gently, "You can have some after dinner." She yelled back, "Why should I listen to you? Dad says you're just the maid." Grace heard. I saw her expression freeze, but all she did was walk over and whisper, "Mom, I'm sorry. I'll talk to her. She didn't mean it." And that was what broke my heart. Not the child's words, but the way my daughter had been trained to apologize for everyone but herself, how she'd learned to carry the weight of others' behavior as if it were her own. She never raised her voice at Victor, never clashed with his parents. She swallowed her hurt, smiled through the pain, and treated injustice like it was just part of the marriage contract. Victor never did dishes, never changed a diaper. On the rare occasions he picked up a broom, he was hailed as the perfect husband. Grace, meanwhile, became the unpaid labor of the household. No vacation days, no compensation, no recognition. One night, I got up for a glass of water and overheard them through the cracked bedroom door. Victor was yelling, "God, can you not emotionally blackmail me for once? Just because your mom's here, you think you can act out?" I stood there, hand shaking. My daughter had become his punching bag, and she didn't even have the right to protest. I stayed up all night in the living room, afraid that in the morning she'd put on her smile again like nothing had happened. Some nights, when I couldn't sleep in the guest room, I'd take out my journal and write. The very first page said, "My daughter has forgotten that she deserves to be loved too." I kept writing day after day, not to build a case, not to start a war, but to remind myself one day she will wake up. And when she does, I need to be the one to tell her, "You're not crazy, you're not selfish, you're just finally blessedly awake." That day when Grace called me, her voice wasn't like usual. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. She just said softly, "Mom, I'm not coming home for Christmas. I'm going on a trip." I was quiet for a moment, then replied, "That sounds nice. A trip could be good." Then I hung up. That night, I sat alone in the living room, my fingers wrapped around the old teacup I'd used for over a decade, but my hands were cold, like I was holding a stone. I knew what she meant by a trip. It wasn't vacation. It was escape. I've seen Victor and Samantha's true colors for years. That call from Grace wasn't a request. It was a release. It was her finally giving herself permission to let go. I stayed up the whole night and pulled out the black leather ledger tucked beneath my bed. It held records of the money I'd quietly kept after selling our old family home. I told myself it was for emergencies, for my old age, but now I realized it had been sitting there for no reason. Grace didn't need it to survive. She needed it to leave. It wasn't about ability. She could make her own money. What she needed was a launching pad, something that was hers, completely hers. The next morning, I went to the bank. The clerk asked, "Would you like to include a note with the transfer?" I said, "Yes, right. For my daughter's own life, non-refundable." That was the moment I understood. What I'd been waiting for all these years wasn't for Grace to change. It was for me to stop pretending I didn't see what was happening, to stop playing the quiet, stay-at-home mother. That night, I wrote another page in my journal. She said she wouldn't be home, but I know she's finally starting to walk her own road. It won't be easy, but at least it'll be hers. I clicked the pen closed and turned off the light. It was dark outside, but I felt calm, as I knew I'd just given her the safety net she'd never asked for, but always deserved. 3 days after Grace left the country, Victor and Samantha showed up at my door again. It just rained. The air still carried that rich, damp scent of soil. They stood there with smiles too wide to be real. "Samantha, Grandma, we just wanted to check in on you," Samantha chirped, pulling out a box of perfectly packaged cinnamon rolls. "Your favorite." I didn't take them. I simply stepped aside to let them in, not because I'd softened, but because I wanted to hear exactly what game they were playing. And right on cue, once the box was set down, Victor spoke first. "Bess, We heard Grace is doing well. Off traveling, huh? Samantha added quickly. Yeah, she posted that Aurora photo. Stunning. Even my friends were jealous. I said nothing, just poured each of them a glass of water. I watched them exchange looks like they were trying to decide who'd say it. Finally, Victor cleared his throat and said the words that had been sitting on his tongue the whole time. Bess, we heard you sold your house recently, and well, Grace received the funds. I set my cup down and looked him in the eye. Who told you that? Victor gave a sheepish chuckle. Oh, nothing serious, just something we heard. We just thought maybe Grace is under a lot of pressure managing it alone, so we wondered if... If what? I cut in. If maybe, Samantha said, leaning in with a smirk, we could help manage it. We're younger. We understand investments better. We could really help her stretch it. I smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was thin, like the first skim of ice over a winter pond. Clear, delicate, and sharp enough to cut. You both know I gave her that money, right? They glanced at each other, suddenly unsure. You think I'm some daft old lady who hands out cash whenever someone cries, nods whenever someone smiles? I said slowly. My daughter earned that money the hard way by surviving you. Neither of them moved. They stood frozen in place as though my words had been a slap. I turned my gaze to the door, and with one final, deliberate word, I added, if either of you show up again, I will call the police. I didn't wait for a response. I knew the game. I knew the rules they wanted to play. But not anymore. I wasn't going to be the pawn, the person to placate their lies. I walked to the door, opened it wide, and watched them turn and leave. They were stunned, but I felt the power in that moment, the power I had taken back from them. As I closed the door behind them, the sound of the latch clicking was the loudest noise in the room. The old patterns were gone. The game they had been playing was over. A few days after the confrontation with Victor and Samantha, I found myself sitting in my mother's old chair in the living room, sipping my tea, reflecting on everything that had led me here. I looked around the room and felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The place was familiar. The walls had memories of family dinners, and the kitchen still smelled of the bread my mother used to bake. Yet, it felt different now. It felt like a place where I could finally breathe. I had spent so many years being the silent one, the one who faded into the background, taking on the burden of everyone else's expectations without ever questioning my own needs. But now, I had started to see the world in a new light. For the first time, I wasn't just Amanda's mother or Victor's wife. I was Bess. I was someone who deserved respect, someone who could stand up for herself, and most importantly, someone who was allowed to live on her own terms. My phone buzzed on the table, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was another message from Samantha. Mom, we need to talk. Please come home. This is tearing our family apart. I stared at the message, feeling that familiar ache rise in my chest. I had heard these words before, only they had never meant what they seemed to. They were always about guilt, about me being the one to give in, to fix everything. And honestly, I had had enough. I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find a woman in her late 50s standing on the porch. She was holding a small bundle of flowers, a warm smile on her face. I'm sorry to bother you, dear, she said, but I just wanted to check in and see if you needed anything. I heard about the trouble with your daughter, and I just wanted to offer my support. I stood there, surprised. The woman introduced herself as Sarah, a neighbor I had never really spoken to much before. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. She didn't know the details of my life, but she understood the pain of being overlooked, of being seen as insignificant. She wasn't offering solutions. She wasn't judging me. She was simply offering kindness. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I really needed that. We stood there for a few moments, sharing a quiet moment of connection before she finally handed me the flowers. I just wanted you to know that you're not alone, she said, before turning to leave. As I watched her walk back down the driveway, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, hope. Not hope that everything would magically get better with Samantha or Victor, but hope that I could finally find peace within myself. That maybe, just maybe, I had the strength to move forward without constantly looking back. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Grace's messages continued to come in, each one more desperate than the last. But this time, I didn't respond. I focused on myself, on my own healing, and on building a life that was no longer dependent on the approval or validation of others. Victor didn't stop either. He continued to try to reach out, to twist the narrative and play the victim. He couldn't handle the fact that I had walked away and taken control of my own destiny, but I had no intention of giving him or Samantha the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Then, one evening, the phone rang. It was Heather, my attorney, calling with an update on the divorce proceedings. She was upbeat, which was rare, and I felt my heart skip a beat. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "We've received a ruling on your case. The court has granted your divorce, and all assets have been properly separated. The best part? The judge ruled that any claims Victor had regarding the house and assets from your mother are completely invalid. He has no claim to anything." For the first time in years, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had fought hard for this, not just for my financial independence, but for my emotional freedom. It felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The shackles of the past, of guilt and resentment, were finally gone. "Thank you, Heather," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "You've helped me more than you know." As the call ended, I sat in silence for a few moments, letting the news sink in. I realized that the life I had been living had never been my own. It had been shaped by the needs and expectations of others. But now, I was free to shape it however I wanted. That night, I took a long walk around the neighborhood. The cool evening air felt refreshing on my face. As I walked past the small park, I saw Sarah sitting on the bench watching the stars. I walked over to her and sat down beside her. For a long time, neither of us said anything. We just sat there, quietly taking in the night. "You look different," Sarah said softly after a while. "Like you've finally found peace." I smiled. "Maybe I have." As I walked through the days that followed, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known in years. I started to engage with life again, not as someone's wife or mother, but as me, Bess. I reconnected with old friends, began spending time doing things I loved, and even started volunteering at the community center. The warmth of the connections I was building with people who truly saw me gave me the strength to keep moving forward. Then, one day, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was familiar, Grace's. I stared at the envelope for a moment before opening it, my heart heavy with the anticipation of whatever words she had written. It was clear from the moment I started reading that this was a letter of apology. In the letter, Grace acknowledged everything that had happened. She admitted her mistakes, the way she had taken me for granted, and how she had let her father's influence cloud her judgment. She wrote about how she regretted pushing me away and how she had come to realize the sacrifice I had made for her all these years. "I know I have hurt you, Mom," the letter read, "and I can never take that back. But I want you to know I've been thinking a lot about everything. I'm sorry for the way I treated you, for not seeing you as the amazing person you are. I hope you can forgive me one day." Tears welled up in my eyes as I finished reading. For the first time in a long while, I felt the knot in my chest loosen. It wasn't a promise of reconciliation, but it was a start. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for healing. A few days later, Grace called me. Her voice was different this time, calm, sincere, and full of remorse. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I want to make things right. I know it'll take time, but I'm willing to work for it. I want you to know how much I love you, and how sorry I am for everything I've done." I took a deep breath before answering. "Grace, I've always loved you, but I need you to understand that love doesn't mean putting myself last anymore. I've been silent for too long. I've allowed myself to be invisible, to think that my needs didn't matter. But they do, and I need you to understand that." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Grace spoke again, her voice filled with emotion. "I understand, Mom, and I'm sorry. I just want you back in my life. I've missed you." "I've missed you too, sweetheart," I said softly. "But I need to take my time. I need to find my own way first, and I'm doing that. I'm living for me now." We ended the conversation with a promise to take it slow, to rebuild trust, but most importantly, to not rush things. I needed to be sure that when I welcomed Grace back into my life, it would be on my terms, not because of guilt or obligation, but because we both truly wanted it. Weeks turned into months. With each passing day, I felt stronger. The idea of a life where I was in control, where I made the decisions, no longer felt like a dream. It was my reality now. I continued to work at the community center, volunteering, helping others, and filling my life with the kind of purpose I had always been too afraid to embrace before. One evening, I was walking home from the center when I passed by Sarah again. This time, she was sitting on the bench near the park, watching the sunset. I stopped for a moment and smiled. "You always seem to be in the right place at the right time," I said. Sarah smiled warmly. "Sometimes, we just need to stop and be present. Life doesn't need to be complicated." I sat down beside her, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely at peace. There were no regrets, no lingering bitterness, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I was finally living for myself. The phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to see a message from Grace. "Hey, Mom, I've been thinking. I want to visit you this weekend. Maybe we can talk more about everything. I promise it'll be different." I stared at the message, my heart swelling. For the first time, I felt like I could truly open the door to her, without fear or hesitation. I smiled to myself and replied, "I'd love that, Grace. Let's take it one step at a time." And so, with every step forward, I realized that life wasn't about waiting for others to change, but about changing myself. It wasn't about waiting for others to validate me. It was about knowing that I was enough on my own.